on day 7 of the Tom Girardi trial, the legal trial of the century, and we have some very interesting cross-examination of Ryan Robertson, the IRS agent who did an investigation into this whole matter. We're also going to hear some interesting information about his capacity from a neuro doctor. But let's start with Ryan Robertson, this IRS agent, and he testified in the prior day, day 6, about the amount of money that was moving through the firm and going to Girardi and for his bills. And then yesterday comes the cross-examination. So what did you think about the cross-examination, Stuart? How did this guy hold up?
So again, when you're a defense attorney in these cases, and we talked about this the other day, you're just looking for nuggets. You're looking for something that you can grab onto. And you got to remember the prosecutors here have to put together, they have to build a case. They have to build everything up and establish it through the witnesses, through the evidence. And if you're the defense attorney, all you have to do is poke holes in that. And so I thought that there was an interesting interaction between this IRS agent and the public defender, Charles Snyder, who's cross-examining him. And he's saying, hey, didn't you see these checks over here that were forged? And shouldn't they have been considered in your analysis? Now, whether those checks were connected or not, I don't know the answer to that. But the guy says, no, they're not pertinent to the witness says, no, they're not pertinent to the investigation. And he's like, so you shouldn't have even considered them? No, I shouldn't have even considered them. He better be right that he shouldn't have considered them, because if he should have considered them, that becomes something to look at in determining whether there is culpability of Tom Girardi here, or is it this mastermind, according to the defense, Christopher Kamen, who came along and moved money around, and he's going on trial next year, I think, for these same charges. So that's really what they're trying to do, is focus this on Christopher Kamen and show that the investigation by this IRS agent, it didn't include all the facts that he needed to consider. And if you can get the jury to buy that, then you can defeat some of the testimony, or maybe all the testimony, of the IRS agent.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the IRS agent, Mr. Robertson, got visibly frustrated, according to the reporter. And this is coming from the reports on law.com from Amanda Bronstad. She's been doing an excellent job.
Great job.
And we've been following the trial through her reporting, which is fantastic. He grew visibly frustrated when he was questioned, and when it was suggested that he didn't have all the relevant information in his investigation. And it's interesting how experts do this. It would be better to say, yes, I considered it, and it didn't have an impact on my ultimate conclusion, versus, no, I didn't consider it because it wasn't important. It kind of makes you wonder, well, maybe you should have at least considered it, right? I mean, it's reasonable to at least consider it. He also denied that any of the checks were forged, which I don't know if that's true or not. That remains to be seen, and maybe we'll see that. What about these checks? So the defense attorney, Mr. Snyder, introduced emails that had to do from Tom Girardi, who apparently suffered, so the argument goes, from mental decline in 2020, where he was spending an extraordinary amount of time on a scam involving a purported $5 billion check, and then emailing Joe Biden. I mean, what did you make of that?
Well, obviously, this case, as you and I have discussed, is about timing. And when did Mr. Girardi have a mental decline? Let's assume that he does have some mental decline at the age of 85 years old, from whatever it may be, dementia, Alzheimer's, maybe just old age. When were these crimes, or at least the allegation by the prosecutors, when did these crimes begin? We're talking back to 2010. And so the question is, here in 2020, it looks like Girardi got caught up in one of these Nigerian print schemes from somebody regarding a $5 billion check, and he was spending an inordinate amount of time on this, and people in the firm were kind of like, what's going on? So he clearly was acting funny in 2020. The question, though, is how far back does that go? And there was a testimony that he was never the same after a car accident from 2017. But the article here clarifies that the impact from that 2017 car crash really doesn't show up from a mental decline standpoint till 2019 or 2020. And then what's the correlation there? Is it really from the car accident? Could be, but it could just be from old age. It could be from dementia, Alzheimer's. It could be from many things. And of course, dementia and Alzheimer's, Keith, we deal with that as probate litigators. It's a disease that comes on slowly at first, but then it has the decline doesn't get, it gets worse.
It's a
with
progressive
time.
disease.
It's a progressive disease. Thank you. Couldn't find my words there. But it doesn't get better. So he may be suffering from those, but he's 85 now, and we've heard that he's involved in what's going on in the courtroom. At least that's been the reporting. This doesn't seem to be somebody that's in the place where they're just suffering with dementia and Alzheimer's, where they can't even communicate or focus or have this executive functioning, which we'll get to in a minute.
Yeah, and I think there's 2 points when it comes to capacity issues that we deal with in our trust litigation. One is timing. When did this come on? Number 2 is severity. So you can have somebody who has dementia, but if it's mild to moderate, they still have capacity. Just because you have dementia doesn't mean you're completely incapacitated. Or it could be severe and you are completely incapacitated, but that severity matters and the timing matters. I also wonder this scam in 2020 where he's spending time trying to get a $5 billion check, how much of that is the actions of a desperate man? 2020 is when the whole thing implodes and he desperately needs money. You could kind of see that somebody who's desperate for money, even if they're only mild cognitive impairment, they might want that to be true and want to spend a lot of time trying to get that. But that gets us to the next witness, which is Dr. Helena Chu. This is a neurologist at the University of Southern California Keck School of Medicine. It was a defense witness brought in. Now, the prosecutors aren't done with their case, as I understand it. They're still presenting their case in chief, but this is probably a witness that was brought in out of order due to timing that happens during trials. And she's coming in and she's going to say that she thinks that Mr. Girardi is suffering from cognitive impairment. So what was your impression of Dr. Chu's testimony?
Well, we have to be careful here because Dr. Chu has already testified at the competency hearing that Girardi did not have the ability to stand trial. And that was her opinion, her medical, legal, that was her, what am I trying to say?
Medical opinion.
It was her medical opinion. But you had U.S. District Judge Josephine Staten, who we've been in front of on other cases, and she found Tom Girardi to be competent even after hearing these issues that he was having cognitive decline. And Judge Staten said, look, he's feigning symptoms of cognitive decline. That was her assessment or her determination. And she also said, look, even if he does have some decline, he's a lawyer. He was a lawyer for many years, and he can understand all of the procedures that are going to be happening. He's very familiar with courtrooms and how they act. And so he is competent to stand trial.
So that's where we're getting to the severity. So somebody can have mild dementia and still have capacity, and ultimately that's what the judge decides. And these experts, these doctors, they come in and they give their medical opinion, but capacity is determined as a matter of law by the judge after hearing that opinion, and the judge ultimately decides, does this person have capacity or do they not? In this case, it'll be the jury that will decide that, whether or not there's capacity or not on the part of Mr. Girardi. So it's interesting that the doctors provide the opinions, but ultimately it's the judge or the jury who decides the ultimate conclusion as to whether there is capacity. Let's talk about timing. What was the timing issue with Dr. Chu?
So Dr. Chu is saying, look, there was this car accident in 2017, and then the mental decline became more pronounced in 2019, 2020. But of course, the prosecutor, and it's Ali Moghadas, jumps up when he gets a chance to go and points out that, look, the things that we're saying that this guy did started in 2010. And then there's also the issue of the Rui Gomez family. There was a settlement in 2015, and there's no testimony, at least from Dr. Chu, that Tom Girardi was suffering from mental decline in 2015, and that's when Tom Girardi's telling the Rui Gomez family, the retired Supreme Court Justice of the state of California, he's the one that's working on your settlement.
Which is nonsense.
Just a bizarre claim, and he's saying that in 2015, and so that's an issue that the defense is going to have to answer.
Yeah, and Dr. Chu's looking at Girardi 2021, 2023, so it's after everything has already been done. And even if he is suffering from mental decline in 2020, what about 19, 18, 17, like going back in time. And we do this a lot in our trust litigation cases where you'll have somebody who, yes, has cognitive decline and maybe even full-blown lack of capacity in a given year, but they created a trust or a trust amendment 5 years prior.
Right.
And so now the question is, well, what was their condition on the moment they created the trust? Because that's what matters, legally speaking. And that's what matters here too, legally speaking. What was his capacity in each of these years at each of these times when he committed these acts? And I don't think you're going to be able to take everything that happened between 2020 and 2023 and try to extrapolate it back to 2010, 2012, 2015 even. I just don't think that's going to work, and it doesn't sound convincing to me, but ultimately the jury will have to decide that.
Well, and one thing the jury heard yesterday, and they heard it from Tom Girardi himself, was the prosecutors put up some clips from the Real Housewives of Orange County, and that was from 2019, if my memory's correct. So 2019, again, it's that date where 2020, it appears in the latter part of 2020, it appears that people at Tom Girardi's firm are noticing he's acting different. He can't remember cases, can't remember if the case is settled or not, which, by the way, you and I have issues there too. We have cases in the firm and we have to keep constantly reviewing them and knowing them. But ultimately what happened here is this clip from 2019, Tom Girardi's talking about his alma mater, which I think is your alma mater, isn't it?
Yeah, Loyola in L.A. And also you said Real Housewives of Orange County is Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. So for our Real Housewives fans.
Sorry, that was a faux pas.
Yeah, that's a big mistake.
But what was in that clip, and what were your thoughts about that?
Well, they're just showing, and this is 2019, and Girardi's talking to the camera, and he's very, articulate, and he's talking about how there's more and more women graduating from Loyola Law School in Los Angeles, which is his alma mater, my alma mater. And he's stating with his wife at his side, he's saying that jurors now, they watch things like that. And so he's saying that's a good thing, for the jury. And he also says that I got all the accolades on the trial, he said in the clip, but forget about that. It was that wonderful, sweet client that jurors liked. So that doesn't sound like somebody who's lacking in cognitive ability to be able to think like that, articulate something like that, say something like that.
Yeah, and I think your point's well taken. In our cases, when we're doing a trust contest, for example, and there's a trust that's created in 2015, but then somebody gets dementia and Alzheimer's in 2020, and that's when it starts to manifest itself. The courts don't say, oh, therefore the 2015 trust instrument is automatically out because 5 years later they started suffering from mental decline. And so I think, again, the defense attorneys here are doing anything and everything they can to poke holes in the witnesses who are testifying, showing they didn't have all the data, showing that they didn't have the ability to testify properly because they didn't complete the picture for the jury, and they should have analyzed these things better. So if you can get the jury to focus on that and get away from Tom Girardi, and then you get into the idea that people at his firm in 2020 are saying he's off, the prosecutor's got to bring it back to 2010, 2015, when he's making these bizarre statements to his clients about California Supreme Court justices being involved in a settlement, for example.
Yeah, and it's just out and out false statements, which really is the underpinning of the fraud case that the prosecutors are presenting against Tom Girardi.
The one last thing I think was interesting is that Dr. Chu is on cross-examination, and she's being asked, is Tom Girardi incapable of committing fraud? And her response was, I don't know. So again, this is a jury hearing this from Girardi's expert, who cannot say definitively that he's incapable of committing fraud that's been alleged against him.
Yeah. So once again, the medical people and doctors, they can only provide their opinion, but it's going to be the jury that makes the answer and ultimately decides if this is fraud or not. But so far, a lot of really interesting, and I think the defense got some shots in yesterday. I don't know that it was enough so far. The defense hasn't put on their case in chief yet, so there's more to come. But so far, it's looking like the evidence is stacking up pretty hard against Tom Girardi.
I would agree with that assessment.
All right. Well, thanks for watching Day 7. We'll be back with Day 8.